The snow came early that year, sharp as broken glass and quiet as shame. It buried the ridge and the cedar groves long before the town was ready for it, long before any horse could cross the pass or any wagon dare the old road south. The sky itself seemed stitched shut, a pale dome over the land, and in that hush of cold she bled. Her name was Maybelle Harlow. She lay on her back on a ticking mattress inside a sod-roofed cabin that smelled of kerosene and smoke and the copper stench of childbirth. Her legs were slick with her own blood, the sheets soaked and discarded, the water pail long empty. The baby had come at dawn, a girl, small and pink and squalling with a rage that seemed borrowed from the mother. She cried to be heard, but only the crows answered back. Maybelle didn't cry. She stared at the rafters and waited to die. Outside, her husband split wood. His name was Calvin Harlow, a man carved from leather and long winters. He had a hard mouth and a harder hand, and the only thing he'd ever whispered was threat. He'd been a farmer once, then a trapper, then something darker in Missouri before the war. Out here, in the folds of Wyoming territory, he was God in a cabin no one visited. Maybelle had come west with him when she was just 16. That was 4 winters ago. 4 winters of silence and obedience, and nights where her screams had no witness but the snow. She had not meant to survive the birth. She had prayed, silent and deep inside herself, that the labor would kill her, or at least the baby. Because Calvin had warned her plain, that if she birthed another girl, he'd gut the little thing and leave her to rot like afterbirth. "Ain't feeding no useless mouth," he'd said. He'd buried the last girl 2 winters back, never named her. Maybelle remembered the sound of the shovel breaking frozen earth, how long he took with it, like he was planting something he hoped would grow. Now there was another girl, and Maybelle had lived. She didn't know how. Maybe the devil had stepped aside. Maybe God was crueler than she thought. The baby lay swaddled in a torn flour sack, asleep in a wooden crate. Her breath was shallow and her eyelids trembled like she dreamed already of hunger. Maybelle reached one hand toward her, then stopped. There was a tear in her flesh that hadn't closed, and every movement sent a lightning crack of pain through her pelvis. She tasted iron in her mouth and smelled the rank odor of something rotting inside her. The door creaked. Maybelle's hand dropped back to the mattress. She braced. Calvin stood in the doorway with snow in his beard and a dead jackrabbit dangling from one hand. His eyes passed over her like she was meat cooling on the floor. "You didn't die," he said. She didn't answer. He crossed to the crate. The rabbit swung, blood trailing in dots on the wood floor. "She's still breathing," he said. His voice was low, calculating. "I'll give it a day." Maybelle turned her face to the wall. She pressed her mouth against the boards and whispered the girl's name into the grain, the name she'd never say aloud, not yet. He didn't stay long. He dropped the rabbit on the table and went back out into the wind, muttering about snares and pelts. He would drink tonight. He always did when he had to make a choice. When night came, the baby stirred. Maybelle, feverish now, crawled from the bed. Her legs barely worked, and she left a smear of blood behind her. She found the crate, lifted the child. She was impossibly warm and impossibly light, and her eyes, barely open, seemed to look through her. She rocked her against her breast. No milk came. "Don't cry," she whispered. The wind howled. That night Calvin came home late. He'd taken a flask out to the tree line. When he came back, he stank of rye and wet fur and guilt he couldn't name. He saw the crate empty. He saw the blood on the floor. He didn't ask. He stood over Maybelle, who clutched the baby in a feverish grip, her eyes wide and half-mad. "Give her here," he said. Maybelle tightened her arms. Calvin reached. She bit him. He struck her so hard she dropped the child. The baby hit the floor with a soft thump. Maybelle screamed. She scrambled across the floor, leaving streaks of blood, and pulled the child into her arms. The baby cried. She was alive, but her leg was twisted. Calvin stared at them both. Then he turned, slow, and left the cabin. Maybelle didn't sleep. She pressed her face to the baby and whispered her name again. Mara. She didn't hear the horse until morning. The sound came thin through the trees, hooves cutting through the crusted snow. No one came this far unless they were lost or looking to bury something. No one dared ride near the Harlow homestead. She reached for the rusted rifle near the stove, but her arms failed her. She waited, and the man she hated most rode out of the trees. He dismounted slow, favoring his left leg like he still bore the wound she'd given him 3 years back, a knife sunk deep into muscle. He didn't speak. He tied his horse to the post. Then he looked at the cabin and all its ghosts. His name was Jude Mercer. He was her brother, and she'd sworn to kill him if ever he came back. But he had come anyway, and the snow hadn't stopped. Jude didn't knock. He stepped inside like a man returning to the place he'd tried to forget. The door hung open behind him, letting in a gust that swept soot from the hearth and turned the oil lamp to flicker. The cabin was darker than he remembered, colder too, and it stank of blood and birth and something worse, neglect maybe, or despair. His eyes found her on the floor. Maybelle had managed to drag herself back to the bed, the baby curled beneath her chin, both of them wrapped in an old deer hide with the fur worn smooth. Her hair clung to her face in greasy strands, her lips cracked from fever. The rifle lay beside her like a dead limb. She didn't reach for it. Jude stood still, letting her look at him. The years had carved him deep, new lines at the mouth, a darkness around the eyes, but the shape of him was the same scar across the brow, the same stiff leg, the same smell of sweat and horse and powder. His hat was crusted with frost. His hands, gloveless, were raw with cold. He hadn't come for warmth. He hadn't come to ask forgiveness. He came because of the letter. A girl in Green Hollow had passed it to him, whispered that a woman needed help north of the ridge. Said she was dying, said she'd had a child, no name, just a scrawl, please. It was her handwriting. That had been enough. I told you never to come back, Maybelle rasped. Her voice was barely sound. Jude stepped closer, and you sent for me. I didn't. He looked down at the baby. Her face was round and red, the faintest bruise blooming under her left eye. Her breath came ragged. I saw Calvin's trail, Jude said. He went west. Maybelle didn't answer. I can kill him. Still, she said nothing. Jude crouched by the hearth. He pulled his knife and split the jackrabbit on the table. No firewood left, just damp bark in the corner. He stoked what little he could. The smell of cooking meat filled the cabin, oily and bitter. The baby stirred. Maybelle tried to sit up, but her arms buckled. Jude caught her. She slapped him, her hand weak, the sound dull. It didn't matter. He let her go, gentle. I didn't come to fight, he said. You ran, she whispered. When Pa died, when Calvin married me off, you left me here. I was 17. You were stronger than him. Jude looked at her then, really looked. Not the girl who used to braid feathers into her hair, not the girl who'd wept when the hens froze one bad winter, not the girl who'd pressed a knife to her brother's leg when he said he was leaving. This was something else, a woman hollowed out and clinging by thread. He pulled a flask from his coat, pressed it to her lips. She drank, gagged, drank again. She's hungry, Jude said, nodding at the child. No milk, Maybelle muttered. I'll ride for goat's milk in the morning. No, she said, eyes sharp. He'll see you. He watches the road. Jude leaned back, thought, I can trap something. Not enough. She was right. The snow had buried every sign of life. Even the ravens were gone. "I'll fix her leg," he said. "She's just a baby. I've set worse bones." He didn't wait for permission. He unwrapped the child and laid her gently on the furs. Her leg was turned at the knee, the socket swollen. He touched it. She screamed. Maybelle gritted her teeth. "If she dies." "She won't." He worked slow, broke twigs from the kindling pile, wrapped them in cloth, splinted the leg. Her crying subsided. It was a quiet cry now, exhausted and breathless. When he finished, he wrapped her again and placed her beside Maybelle. "Don't name her," she said. "I thought you would have, first thing." "I did in my head, that's enough." Jude stood. "You'll need a wet nurse." "No one comes here." "I'll find someone." "There's no one left," her voice cracked. "He killed the rest or scared them off." Silence folded between them. "You hate me," Jude said. Maybelle didn't speak. "Say it." "I don't have the strength." He nodded. "Good. Save it for the baby." That night Jude didn't sleep. He took the rifle, sat by the door, and watched the trees. Snow whispered down through the pines, erasing every track, even Calvin's. Whatever had passed between them, whatever hatred she still carried, was small now beside the hunger in that child's cry. Before dawn, he left. When Maybelle woke, he was gone. But he left the knife by her bed. And the first squirrel of the season, skinned and cleaned, beside the hearth. She roasted it with shaking hands and fed the broth to the baby with a rag, drop by drop. She didn't thank him, she didn't speak his name. But when night fell again and she heard hooves, she didn't reach for the rifle. Jude came back with more roots bark, something dried he swore would make milk come. And he brought news. Calvin at the Bracken place, he said, burned it, took what he wanted. Did he ask after me? No. Maybelle nodded. Then he's coming back. Jude said nothing. He just sat near the hearth, the baby between them, and watched the shadows gather like men before a raid. The thaw came slow, like a bruise rising under skin. By the second week, the snow had begun to rot around the stumps, turning to slush that stank of sap and something older, unearthed from beneath the weight of winter. Crows came back first, then the wolves. Tracks crisscrossed the ridge like warnings left in flesh. Inside the cabin, Maybelle still couldn't walk. Jude kept to silence. He trapped what he could, squirrel, grouse, one half-starved fox he let go with a kick. He carved a cradle from pine, nailed it with care, sanded the splinters smooth. The child, small and silent now, lay in it swaddled in flannel, her eyes wide with that strange, ancient look babies sometimes have, like they remember too much. Maybelle began to whisper stories to her in the long hours between fever and sleep. Not fairy tales, just small things, how water moves when it breaks through ice, how you can tell if a hawk, watching by the sound the woods make. She never once called her by name, but the girl listened, like she knew. Calvin didn't come back. At first, Maybelle took that as proof he was dead. A trap, maybe, or drunk enough to fall in the river, but Jude said no. He'd seen smoke down by the timber line, a slow black column that rose like a scar. He's waiting, Jude said. He's watching the road. He knows you're here. Maybe. Maybelle tried to sit up straighter. Her belly had gone hollow, like something scooped her out from the inside. The stitches had split, twice. Jude boiled thread and sewed her again. He didn't flinch when she screamed. One night, she said, "You remember when Pa caught us trying to run?" Jude didn't look up. "You were 9, I was 11. We packed 3 apples in a matchbox. Thought we'd get all the way to Cheyenne. He found us by the dry creek. Whipped you worse than me." You lied, Jude said. Said it was your idea. It was. He nodded once. They didn't speak again for an hour. The fire popped, slow and steady. The baby slept with one fist curled like she meant to strike. Later, Jude said, I should have come sooner. May Bell didn't answer. She was thinking of the pistol. She kept it beneath a floorboard, loaded and wrapped in wax cloth. She oiled it last summer, just before the bruises healed. She didn't tell Jude about it, not because she didn't trust him, but because trust was a word that didn't fit anymore, not between them. The pistol was hers, her last defense if he failed, or if he didn't. A week passed. Then on a Thursday, they found the rabbit, strung up on the post outside the cabin. Skinned, gutted, still warm. Jude cursed, pulled it down, kicked snow over the blood. Maybelle stood at the window with the baby in her arms and watched the trees. He's near, she thought. And that night she loaded the pistol. She didn't sleep. She lay on the mattress, the baby against her chest, and waited for the door to break. Jude sat with the rifle balanced on his knees. The fire burned low. But nothing came. Just wind, just silence. At dawn, Maybelle dreamed of water, clear water, running cold across shale, a girl washing blood from her hands while something screamed far off. When she woke, the cradle was empty. She sat up too fast. Pain seared through her like a nail driven straight. The door was open. She screamed. And Jude turned from the path, the baby in his arms, blanket pulled tight. She was crying, he said, didn't want to wake you. Maybelle staggered to him and snatched the child away. She clutched her so tight the baby began to fuss again. I won't let her go, she said. I wasn't leaving. You don't get to decide. Jude said nothing. They sat like that for a long time, the two of them crouched by the threshold, the baby between them, the wind whispering in from the hills like it carried secrets. That night they buried the rabbit carcass deep. Maybelle placed a sprig of dried sage over the soil. The next morning there was a mark on the door. A crude X drawn in soot. Jude wiped it away with his sleeve, but she saw his face tighten. Later he rode out, said he was going to check the western ridge. He didn't come back that night. Maybelle waited with the pistol across her lap and the baby at her breast. She knew Calvin's shape in the dark. She knew how his boots sounded on the step, how he spat before speaking, how his breath changed just before he raised his hand. And just before sleep claimed her, she thought she heard it. A shovel breaking earth. At dawn, Jude hadn't returned. The light came weak and blew across the frostbitten grass, and the trees stood hushed and distant like they meant to watch something die. The baby cried once, then curled into herself, too tired to make a sound. Maybelle fed her what little broth she had left. Her hands shook, fever clung to her like old skin. The pistol sat by the hearth within reach. She hadn't slept more than a blink. Every creak of wood, every settling gust made her flinch. She waited until mid-morning, then hauled herself to the door. She could barely stand. Her legs were two dead things she dragged like sled runners. She leaned on the wall, her nightdress hanging off her shoulders like something stolen. The trees didn't move. The snow was nearly gone, but the cold hadn't left. It had just gone quiet. She didn't call for him. She didn't want to hear her own voice echo back without answer. Instead, she built a fire. She boiled pine needles in water, fed the child from a rag again. The girl's eyes were glassy now, unfocused. Maybelle held her close, sang without sound. By dusk, she began to pray, not with words, but with a kind of knowing. If Calvin came, she'd kill him. If Jude didn't return, she'd die slow. If the child stopped breathing, she'd bury her alone and then sit in that dirt until her blood froze. But Jude did return, just before the moon rose. She saw him stumble from the tree line, his coat dark at the sleeve, face gray with loss. He fell at the steps. She dragged him inside, gritting her teeth. He weighed more than she remembered, blood soaked through his shirt. It was him, Jude said, voice thick. Trap was already set, waited. She tore his coat open. Gash across the ribs, deep, not fatal, but it had bled long. You bring him down. No. Maybelle poured whiskey over the wound. He didn't scream, just bit down on his knuckle and watched the rafters. She stitched him with her own shaking hands. When she finished, she collapsed beside him on the floor. He's coming, Jude said. I know. We could still run. She looked at the child. Her skin was waxen now, her lips dry. She won't make it far. Jude stared at the fire. We could leave her. Say it again, Maybelle said. He didn't. You thinking like him, she spat. You know that. You start measuring a girl's worth by how quiet she is. You've already picked his side. I'm trying to keep you alive. I didn't ask you to. He sat up slow, winced. No, but you asked me back. I didn't. You wanted me here when it ended. Maybelle stared at him, the shadows around his eyes, the old scar on his lip. The brother she'd trusted once, who let her be sold to a man with too many knives. I wanted him dead, she said. And you think I do. That night they slept in shifts. Maybelle rocked the baby through the darkness, whispering a name she never spoke aloud. Jude cleaned the rifle and set snares in the trees, this time not for animals. The sky stayed black until morning. The cold returned. They waited 3 more days. On the 4th, the trap snapped. They heard it at dawn. A metal clang, then a low grunt, and the sound of something large falling. Jude rose fast, wound tight with pain. Maybelle tried to stop him. You go out there, she warned, and he's not dead, you'll never get back in. He looked at her, then at the baby, then back at the door. Then we end it now. He took the rifle, stepped into the snow. Maybelle pressed herself against the window, the trees bent under frost. Birds fled, but there was nothing else. For an hour she saw nothing. Then movement. Not Jude. Calvin. Dragging one leg, his coat torn, blood on his chin. A bare trap clung to his ankle like a steel mouth. He had a pistol in one hand. He limped toward the cabin. No sign of Jude. Maybelle picked up her own pistol, opened the door, and stepped out barefoot into the snow. He saw her, paused. You still alive, he rasped. Guess so. He limped closer. Where's your dog? Gone hunting. A shame. She leveled the gun at his chest. Her arm shook. He grinned. You gonna shoot me, little girl? I already did, she said. And she fired. First shot caught him in the ribs. He staggered, dropped the pistol. She fired again, missed. He reached for his weapon, gasping. She shot him in the throat. He dropped. Didn't move again. The silence that followed was larger than any scream. She stood there barefoot, bleeding again, chest heaving. Smoke from the barrel drifted past her eyes. Jude limped from the trees behind him, rifle in hand. You get him? He asked. She nodded. Jude looked at the body, then at her. She walked past him, back into the cabin, blood in her footprints, The baby had begun to cry. She picked her up, rocked her once, twice. His name won't be spoken here again, she whispered. Jude buried the body without a word. The ground was too frozen for a clean grave. Jude broke through it with the flat of the axe, sweat freezing to his brow as he heaved up clods of earth, layer by stubborn layer. He didn't ask for help, and Maybelle didn't offer. She stayed in the cabin with the baby swaddled against her chest, rocking slow, eyes open but distant. She hadn't spoken since she pulled the trigger. By dusk, Calvin Harlow was in the ground. No cross, no marker, no words. Just a shallow mound near the pines where the snow would fall deepest. They burned his coat, melted his pistol down in the fire until it sagged like wax and hissed in the coals. Jude found the bear trap still clamped to what was left of his ankle. He tossed it in the ravine. Inside, the cabin changed. Not all at once, not cleanly. But it changed. The baby's fever broke the next night. Maybelle sat by the hearth, holding her in one arm while stitching a fresh wrap for the leg with the other. The swelling had gone down. The child didn't cry as much anymore, just breathed, steady and light, her eyes following the shadows that flickered on the rafters like they meant something. Maybelle began to move again. The first step she took on her own nearly buckled her, but she didn't stop. By the end of the week, she could walk from the bed to the fire, slow and bent, the pistol always close. She strung the snare line herself. She boiled the pine broth. She carved her name in the underside of the cradle. Not her own. The girl. Marrow. One morning, she caught Jude watching her. "You'll leave soon," she said. He nodded. "I've got debts." "None here." He looked away. Maybelle didn't press. She understood silence better than speech. And she knew men who stayed too long always rotted into something else. Her brother had come when it mattered. He'd bled, stitched, buried the past. That was more than most. "You'll come back," she said. He didn't answer. But he left a box of cartridges by the door. And a map with the roads drawn careful, inked with warnings. 2 days later, he rode out before dawn. No goodbye. Just hoofprints in the frost and the echo of something unfinished. Maybelle stood at the door with Mara in her arms. The baby clutched at her shirt with one tiny fist. The other hand reached out, toward the snow, toward the road, toward a world she didn't know had tried to kill her. Maybelle closed the door. Sealed it against the wind. She spent the rest of winter alone. No one came, no wagons, no trappers. The old Bracken homestead stayed burnt, and the ridge trail iced over until it vanished beneath the drifts. But Maybelle didn't leave. She trapped and skinned and boiled marrow from bones. She learned how to make a poultice from cattail root and how to tell when the coyotes were close just by the way the birds fell quiet. Spring came late. When the ground thawed, she dug a new garden by the tree line. She planted nothing for food. She planted wildflowers. Myra took her first steps just shy of summer, her legs still crooked but strong enough. She walked like her mother, careful, with purpose, always watching the ground before her like it might shift. Maybelle taught her how to gut a rabbit by the time she was 3. Taught her how to aim by 4. They never spoke Calvin's name. Not once. The cabin filled with silence, but not the old kind, not the kind that cloaks a woman like a shroud and makes her forget her own voice. This was new, a quiet of choice, a stillness earned. Years passed. Mara grew, Maybelle aged hard the way wood splits after long weather. Her hair silvered early, her fingers calloused thick, but she never softened. She kept the pistol. She kept the cradle. And on a hill above the garden, she built a second grave. Not for a body, but for the girl she'd been before the blood. The one who'd begged for death during birth. She buried that version of herself in silence and never visited the mound. Mara never asked who it was for. She didn't have to. One night, a rider came down the old trail, dusty and tired, a long scar under one eye. Mara stood at the door. She didn't call for her mother. She didn't flinch. The man looked at her, then nodded once. He turned his horse and rode back the way he came. Maybelle watched from the window. Who was he? Mara asked. No one, she said. But she kept her hand near the pistol, all the same. By the time Mara turned 7, she could shoot a tin cup at 50 paces. Maybelle watched her line the sight with one eye closed, her stance wide and sure. When the cup flew and clattered into the dust, Maybelle didn't smile. She just said, again. And Mara did. The ridge stayed quiet after that. No men came. But Maybelle knew the world hadn't stopped. Only paused. So she taught the girl everything she knew. How to track by broken grass. How to read a lie in a man's blink. How to tell the difference between love and need. And on the night of her 12th birthday, Mara asked, "Why did he want me dead?" Maybelle looked at her a long time. The moon was high, the trees still. She said, "Because you were born a girl." Mara thought on that, then nodded. Then he died for the right reason. And Maybelle, for the first time in years, let the silence break. She laughed. It wasn't a soft laugh. It was a sound pulled from the throat, ragged and true. The kind that said, "We're still here. We're still breathing. And we didn't stay dead."